Alright everyone, so here we go with creating a custom uniform for use with the Pyware 3D Real View. Now what we've provided here is a template file for Photoshop and GIMP users. Those are both programs that allow you to manipulate images to basically draw or fill in kind of however much detail or however little detail you want to put into it to create your own custom uniform. For this particular example, I'm using the program GIMP, and while it can look pretty intimidating for those that are unfamiliar with it, there's really only a couple sections that we need to pay attention to, those being the main design area, the layers window, the paths window, the color pickers, and then of course our tool palette. If you look in the main design or workspace area, you'll see that we basically have our performer with the default uniform of red and black with the white sash basically flattened out. And that's kind of how the 3D modeling works, is that we'll color in the aspects of the uniform that we want, and then in the Pyware program it gets wrapped around that person in 3D so you get an actual representation. To give you an idea of what we're looking at, I'm going to go down to our layers menu here, or excuse me, our layers window, and I'm going to turn on a couple of different layers, one being the section labels and one being the part outlines. So as you see here, this section is just the front side of the performer. Down here are his legs. We have the back and the neck, his arms on the sides, obviously the face up top, the hands, and the feet. You'll notice that when I enabled the part outlines to be visible, click on it again, or click on the eye to either turn it on or turn it off for visibility, that you see basically a mesh outline for each section or body part. And that outline shows what is going to be encompassed for that particular body part whenever we're coloring in that area. So for example, if we take a look at the front torso here and we just follow that mesh, anything that's inside of that mesh is actually going to be applied to that performer. Anything outside, like the spot over here, outside of that mesh isn't going to be picked up by the Real View model. So you don't have to be too concerned about coloring in between the lines, for lack of a better word, and I'll show you how we can kind of alleviate that to make sure it doesn't get too messy or we don't have any color spillovers. So before we get started, I'm going to turn these sections back off, both the section labels and the part outlines, and let's go ahead and kind of walk through creating a very simple custom uniform together. Let's say we want to make something with white pants and maybe a blue top, white shoes on there. We can do a sash, maybe a little emblem or something of the sort. To get started, what I'll want to do is go over to my paths palette or my paths window, and you'll see a couple different options as we scroll through here that are basically just the guidelines. If we were to open up, a child's coloring book where you have to color in between the color by numbers or color in between the lines or anything like that, this is the same thing. So if we select, for example, just the torso front path. So I'd click on that option, and down at the bottom of the window, if I hover over this, you can make a selection of that path. If I click on this button, it's only going to highlight, by highlight I mean you see the little marching ants or the dotted line, that particular section. So I've clicked on torso front, I told that path to make a selection, and it's made a selection of that particular path. If I go and choose a different path, for example, the back of the torso, click on that option, select path to selection, it's only going to highlight or put the marching ants around the back of that torso. So anytime that we're editing the uniform, we're only going to be able to edit what's inside these dotted lines. That's very important to remember, especially if you're concerned about accuracy, as opposed to just painting over everything with a giant paintbrush. If we only have a portion selected, it's only going to allow us to draw inside those lines. So let's go ahead and start editing this uniform, changing from the red and black to the white and blue that we were talking about. And to begin, let's start with something easy. We'll start with the legs. So what I want to do, instead of trying to select them and making sure that it's completely accurate, we have the legs by default as a path. So all I do on the paths panel, I click on legs, I choose to create a selection from it. Again, we see the marching ants or the guide. So anything that we're going to be editing is only going to be inside of this. We can't edit outside of the legs selection. You'll see we get a little bit of the hips of the front and back, and then the legs themselves here. To do the actual editing, we need to go back to our Layers panel. We want to make sure that Uniform Color is selected. If we were to click on Background right now, we wouldn't actually be editing anything. We would only be editing the background. What we want to edit is this layer that says Uniform Color. So we have our legs path selected. You can see the marching ants. On the Layers panel, we have our Uniform Color layer selected. And we said we wanted to have white pants, so in the color picker, I've just clicked on that. I click and drag all the way up to white, hit OK, and I want to use my paint bucket to fill in these black pants into white. So I've clicked on the paint bucket tool in the tool palette. We have our color set to white, and all I'm doing is just clicking in, and it's filling in the rest for me automatically. As I said, it's only filling in what's inside that marching ants or that dotted line guideline. Let's go ahead and go over to paths. Do the same thing for the feet since we want some white shoes. We'll click on feet, click path to selection. Make sure we're still on the uniform color layer. We are. Click in the shoes, and those are now colored in. Now we're ready to start editing the top half of the uniform, so we'll go back to the Paths panel, select the back of the torso, load that as a path. And for this color we want to do a blue. I've already got it set as the foreground there, so all I need to do is just click this flip button, which makes the the background color into my foreground color. If I wanted to change it to a different blue, again, I just double click. Drag it to the blue that I want, hit OK, and repeat the process. We still have our paint bucket selected, so I'm just clicking in, and it's filling in that color for me automatically. So click the front torso, load that selection as a path. We're all colored in there. Again, outside the boundaries don't matter. If I go back to the Layers panel, turn on the outlines, you'll see that we're only worried about what's inside that mesh area. So this red that's outside of that part of the uniform isn't going to be picked up whenever we save this file out. Now here we already have the sash filled in, probably with an appropriate color, but let's say we wanted to change that. If we go back to Paths, you'll scroll down just a little bit and see that you have a couple different sash options. We have the default, that right to left. Let me deselect everything so this makes a little more sense. You'll see that it's currently outlined in blue because we haven't clicked the button yet to make it a selection. We're just basically making that path visible. We have a left to right sash. You can see if you want it running the opposite direction, or even I think there's a short sash option. So if we wanted to color in that sash a different color, all we would do again, if we want the right to left for this particular example, we would load that as a selection and color it in appropriately. Just for example, I'm going to show you here and then undo those options. Can't forget about the arms. We need to do those real quick. So if we go back to the Paths panel and select our arms, load that selection again, paint bucket, fill it in, we're good. We deselect everything, just take a look at how it looks. Go back to Layers. I want to turn off the part outlines just so I can see how accurate everything is. And you'll notice that we have a little bit of red artifacts left over in a couple places, and I'll show you how to clean that up. So we want to go back to the Paths, and let's work on that collar first and foremost. I believe we have a path option for that. Oh, here we go, collar. Okay, what I'll do here is I'll grab my paintbrush option, and the size of the brush really doesn't matter. If you need to increase it or decrease it, you can do so by either clicking and dragging in here. There are the little arrow keys. But again, we're only editing what's inside these dotted lines. So since we have the whole collar selected, I'm just going to get rid of those little bitty red lines, the artifacts from the leftover uniform, by clicking and dragging, just like you would with a paintbrush here in any other paint program. That's all done. Now notice on the sash we have just a little bit of a hint of an artifact of that red uniform that we colored over. Instead of trying to get right close to it and taking care of that, it would probably be considerably faster if we just selected the torso, painted in everything, get the arms as well, just in case there's anything that we couldn't see. Go ahead and do it the same thing on the back. And then just come back in, select our sash, flip the color back to white or whatever sash color you'd like, and fill that in. So instead of trying to get very, intricate, maybe picking up a pixel or two wide of that incorrect color, we've gone in there and we've corrected it in just a couple steps. Okay, so this is really starting to look how we wanted it to. Let's say if we wanted to add a little emblem or decal, maybe we got an 8-point star that we could add real quick. Select that, fill it in with white. There we go, that's looking good. So, next step is to get this actually into Pyware. Oh, 1 second, I actually see something that I just want to take care of here. It looks to be a little bit of an artifact from the sash and the legs. So we're just filling that in. Since we're on the uniform color layer, I don't really need to select anything in particular. I can just go in here and paint that in, and that'll take care of it really quickly. Alright, so to save it for Pyware, what we want to do is go to the File menu, choose Export, select File Type down at the bottom. For the file type, we want to select a PNG or a PNG image because that does not have a background to it, which is incredibly important since we don't have a background on our image. We only want what's included inside that mesh gradient that we were talking about earlier. And I just want to save that in my fabric folder inside of my user documents Pyware 3D folder. We'll call it blue-white, give it a name, and choose Export. Nothing needed to change on this, so go ahead and hit Export one more time. And we're done. If we hop in Pyware real quick, take a look at how to load it. Let's put somebody on the field so we can see our uniform. Go to the File menu, Document Options, the Real View Perspective. In the Selected Fabric section, I'll assign this to Male Marcher 1. I'm already in my Fabrics folder, so I want to select the blue-white that we just saved. Choose that, hit OK. And now, if we zoom in, he's wearing a ridiculous hat that does not match at all. Take care of that real quick. But you can see we now have our uniform imported into Pyware that we created through GIMP.